and follow along as we answer this really big question today: is there a God? At the top of your notes, the implication is huge, isn't it? The implications are huge. I mean, if there is no God, let's consider that side for a minute. If there's no God, then everything in here is a lie because it says it comes from Him. And if there's no God, we're not accountable to anyone. If there's no God, we don't need salvation from anything. And if there's no God, we are all a law unto ourselves. We determine what is right and wrong, truth and not truth. But on the other side, if there is a God, that changes everything. That means that every life has meaning and purpose and value. It changes how we make choices every day by what we do and don't do. It changes how we look at other people in this world and interact with them. And it also begins to think about an afterlife and how do we make it to that God. You see, the existence of a personal moral God is foundational to everything that Christians believe. And I would even say that all the other questions in Explore God hinge on this one. If there is no God, then there is no point to the other 6 questions in this series. But here's the thing. Every day, we live surrounded, this is number 1, by many indicators of His presence. Every day we are surrounded by many indicators of His presence, of the existence of God. Let's start by looking at 3 natural evidences that sure point to God. Number 1, start with creation. Powerful evidence for God. The latest scientific evidence strongly supports the notion that our universe had an explosive birth. That there was a sudden explosion and this whole thing just came into existence and spread out. In fact, today they say our universe is still expanding outward from that. And so what if we rewound that DVR? What caused the universe to explode into existence? Especially if there was nothing there before its explosive birth. See, not only do we have a universe that exploded into existence, but that includes our precisely ordered solar system, our little corner of the Milky Way galaxy. In fact, have you ever thought that everything in our solar system is exactly right for there to be human life? That this planet just happens to be on a perfect orbit around a giant hot sun to keep its temperature steady. And the sun is exactly the right composition. It's exactly the right mass, the exact right amount of light. We're the exact right distance from it in our orbit around it. Any closer and we chicken fry. Any farther back and we deep freeze. And not only is it exactly where it needs to be, around the exact right kind of sun, but we also happen to have an exact size moon that is exactly where it needs to be, has the exact gravitational pull that this earth needs to keep us stable on our axis, and also so that moon can control our ocean tides. fundamental to supporting and regenerating life. How can that kind of precision and an explosion just happen by chance? See, we also, as Christians, believe in a big bang. We just know who did the banging. When God created a heaven and the earth, and God said, "Let there be light." And this whole universe exploded into existence. Or consider it like this. I have a little Lego set here. It's a snow machine. I thought that was appropriate. And it says there's 50 pieces in this Lego set. Now, I'm going to keep them in the box because I don't want to play pickup. But I want you to imagine with me that I have all 50 pieces in my hand. What are the chances, if I dropped all 50 pieces, that they would come together? What if I did it again? What are the chances that those pieces would come together? And not just that, what are the chances that those pieces would come together exactly in the right order, like it's supposed to be, to make that? I think it's impossible. How much more our universe? That not only do we have all of the right pieces to have human life, every single one of those pieces has been assembled in exactly the right order that it needs to be so that we can be here now. And if this can't accidentally happen and come together with a 50-piece Lego set from Walmart, how in the world could it happen with a universe and a world like this? That leads us to our second big part of natural evidence. Let's talk about design. This watch implies a watchmaker. A painting, like one in the narthex, implies an artist. A book implies an author. A building like this implies an architect who designed it. And here's the rule with design. The more complex the design, the more intelligent the designer. The more complex the design, the more intelligent the designer. Could we take 1 million monkeys and put them all at computers and have them come out with Hamlet? What are the odds? Possible. Wouldn't happen. And yet Shakespeare did it on his first try. Or imagine if you were walking through the woods and you had never seen one, and lo and behold, there was an encyclopedia in the leaves. And you picked up the encyclopedia and began to open it. You're like, this must have had a really intelligent designer. The more complex the design, the more intelligent the designer that stands behind it. Let's go back to our universe for just a minute. I was a little surprised in the Explore God video. They mentioned 12 fundamental laws of the universe. I checked a university, secular university's website this week on that, and it said they have confirmed 26 laws in our universe. Fundamental laws, such as the cosmological constant, the force of gravity, the difference in mass between protons and neutrons. There are 26 confirmed that we know about, that are exactly where they all need to be at the same time so that all of this is possible here. One scientist looked at the odds that even 2 of those fundamental laws would be just right at the same time. And he came up with 1 in 100 trillion chances that even 2 of them would be perfectly aligned for life. and all 26 of them that we know of are perfectly aligned for life, or we could not be here now. Doesn't that sound something so complex? Doesn't that sound like a really, really intelligent designer behind it? And not just the universe, what about our human body? You know that every second your retina conducts 10 billion calculations. It would take the fastest, strongest computer on earth, the Cray, 100 years to do what your retina does every second. 10 billion calculations. And that's just one part of your system in your body so that we can have life. Or the human brain, like this mushy sponge. They estimate that our human brain has a capacity to absorb 20 million books. It's as many books as the largest libraries in the world. And we don't even come close in our lifetime to maximizing its capability. In fact, one doctor, a physician at a church outside of Washington, D.C., said this about his experience in medical school. He said, "Each year in medical school, my faith grew stronger as I glimpsed the handiwork of God through my coursework. I saw fellow students discover God, largely as a result of their training. I sometimes wish every atheist could take gross anatomy or physiology at a medical school level. Because you look at something so complex, and it's got to have a very, very intelligent designer. But there's even more. Not only does creation point to God, not only does design point to God, but we can also talk about this universal moral law, or what we call a conscience. Can you imagine what life on this planet would be like if there was no transcendent moral law? If every single of the 7.5 billion people here now determined for them what truth and false, what was right and what was wrong? Can you imagine how chaotic and anarchy-like this existence would be if everyone determined law for him or herself? But how is it that cross-culturals, boundaries, tribes, oceans, continents, there's this fundamental sense in all of us that murder is wrong, that rape is wrong, that stealing is wrong, that lying is wrong? How do we explain that? Or why do we need G-rated movies all the way up to like R-rated movies? Why should there be any difference for any of them? Or with gaming, why do we have to have E-rated for everyone or M-rated for mature? Or how about this? Is there any first or second grade classroom anywhere in this world, anywhere, any culture, where the teacher comes out and says, "Today, boys and girls, we're going to start our unit on dirty words. And there's going to be a test, and you have to know and define every single one"? Why? Because there's this innate sense that swearing and dirty words are wrong. Where does that come from? See, I believe on your notes there that a universal moral law, our conscience, that an objective moral law implies the existence of a moral law giver. Otherwise, humanity would not have any intrinsic sense of right and wrong. We would all be determining it for ourselves. But we have a conscience where it says God has written on our hearts his basic laws. And though they are flawed in us, powerful evidence that there is a transcendent, absolute truth behind a good and moral lawgiver. So we have that compass of what is right and wrong here and interacting with each other. But by God's grace, we have more than just natural evidence. Friends, we also have what I would call special revelation, particularly the Bible. The Bible also tells us that there is a God and that He does exist. And this Bible is an incredibly unified testimony that cannot be simply man-made. The more you dig in the Bible, the more you realize there is no way that humanity on his own could ever come up with a book like this. Impossible. But rather, this book bears one large divine fingerprint: God's. In fact, this book we call the Bible is actually a book of 66 books written over the course of about 1,600 years by about 40 different authors that has perfect progression and unity of thought. There is no other book compiled like this in the history of the world. And why did our ancestors meticulously copy and preserve this so that it could be passed out and passed on to more people and more generations? Copied way more times than any other book in history, preserved more than any other book in history. Why? Because they knew that theirs was also divine, not just man-made. And why do we need this in addition to natural evidence? Because this identifies that God for us and actually gives us His name. Yahweh, I am. And in this book, the Creator wants to be known by all of you. And the more we read and study and hear it, the more we fully know this God. And so, the evidence is very strong for God. But I think the bigger question that I want to know is, if there's a God, what kind of God is He? If there is a God, what kind of God is He? If you turn your notes over, I want to look really quick at Paul's message in Acts 17, where Paul is preaching in Athens, Greece, which was the idol capital of the world. Idols were all over like a forest with trees. And in their midst, Paul says this, top of your notes backside: the God who made the world and all things in it, this one is Lord of heaven and earth. He doesn't dwell in temples made by man, nor is He served by human hands, as though God needed anything from us, since He Himself gives to all people life and breath and all things. And He made from one man, Adam, every nation of mankind to live on the face of the earth, having determined their appointed times and boundaries of their habitation. Wow. Paul preaches that this God is powerful, that He brought all of this into being, the heavens and the earth. And if you want to go a little deeper, I have some verses on the side that you can look up on your own this week. But for God to bring all of this into being, He had to be far more powerful than all the energy in this universe combined, or He couldn't have brought it all into being. He is a powerful God. And He is also intelligent. It says in verse 26 that God made from one man, Adam, every nation of mankind to live on the face of the earth. This God has appointed their times and even the boundaries of their habitation. See, God knew exactly how He had to create our human bodies, not just so that we could live, but also that we could procreate and fill this life of earth as He desired. He put everything exactly how it needed to be to have life fill this planet. And this God is also the good giver. He doesn't need anything from us, as Paul said, but this God also did not call all of this into being and then go on a lunch break. so that he could just check back in on us from time to time. Paul says he gives to all people life and breath and all things. This God continues to provide for all of the needs of his creation, especially you. Why? That's the question. Why would God do all of this for us? Paul gives that answer in the next verse. Look at verse 27. God did this so that they should seek the God in the hope that they search for him and find him. Have you ever stayed in a hotel room that was pretty dark and your body is not used to the layout of the room, or at someone's house, maybe in their basement, that is also very dark, and again, your body doesn't know the surroundings, and in the middle of the night when you have to go use the restroom, you sort of get up and you sort of creep along, and you're hoping not to stub your toe, feeling for any kind of post, pillar, and once you make it to the restroom, then you know when the light goes off, you've got to go back and do it again, and so little bit by little, you shuffle along. That's exactly what this word means, to search for. It means to feel around for. Careful, searching, exploring. God, is that you? God. And what's the result that God wants? To search for, to grope or feel around for, and find him. You see, this God is inviting. This God is inviting. This God is not distant. He is not unknowable. He is not uninterested in your life. But this God who made you and everything here wants to be known by you. There are many things that a father could pass on to his son, aren't there? I want to show you one verse in the Bible here where King David is old and it's almost his time. And look at these words that David passes on to his young and upcoming king Solomon. He says in 1 Chronicles 28, Solomon, my son, know the God of your father and serve him with a whole heart and a willing mind. For the Lord searches all hearts and understands every plan and thought. And then look at this promise to his son from his own life experience. If you seek him, what? He will be found by you. Son, if you seek God, he will be found by you. And so our God is waiting. He is longing to be sought and found by you. And this God is so loving that on this journey, exploring God, he does not just leave us to figure it out for ourselves. We used to do a lot of hiking long ago in Colorado. This past summer, we did some hiking in Glacier National Park. If you're going to hike, what's the most important thing? You have to find the trailhead. When you find the trailhead, you know that you are on the right path. Friends, God in his love has given every one of us a trailhead. And as we explore God, the trailhead starts there. The cross. Start the search for God there. And just see where it leads. Because God, your God, is just waiting to be found. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. All right, let's stand and go out with our Lord's name and benediction on us. Go in all of his might and power and presence and love. As you go, the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. The Lord look upon you with favor and fill you with his peace. Amen.